Hello. This is the first lesson in the 10th Fetter. And the 10th Fetter is about the wisdom of ignorance. Now, if you work with a curriculum up until this point, you know that we have been working a lot in the lower fives to really discern what you perceive as reality is just your perception. We have looked into that whenever you in 4th, 5th Fetter, whenever you have a reaction to somebody saying something and you feel a reaction coming up in you, we have completely picked apart that delusion that you had where you thought that there was a reason to react. Because whatever you hear other people are saying, whatever you see other people are doing, is just a reflection of you. It's a reflection of your deep-seated traumas, of your shadows, of all the things that you need to look into. And that is what we use the lower fives to really discern. Okay, so what is this indicating to me? Because anger, for example, when you feel anger or annoyance or irritation or anything like that, it's just a diversion. There's something happening in the body. They are saying something or doing something that gives you a feeling in the body. So in the lower fives, what we do is to really look into that sensory experience that you have in the body. Notice, where does this actually come from? Go into the 2nd Fetter, the 3rd Fetter, where we look into that underlying belief that we have of fear, anger, guilt, and shame. And then really picking it apart. And then we completely dissolve, because there is no such thing as fear or guilt or shame. Those are labels we put on an experience that we think that we had in the moment. Now in the higher fives, we have dissolved the parts where you perceive anything but what is arising in this moment. And what we would like to do in this fetter, in the 10th fetter, is really making you very much aware of that whatever you think is happening or did happen. If I ask you about your childhood, how was your childhood? Whatever you think happened didn't. Whatever you perceive as reality at the point, it was only a result of your biochemistry, of your psychological stability, and your emotional maturity. That's it. In the moment, we have an experience. How we perceive that experience is based on thousands and millions of unknown causes and conditions. So many things are present in you perceiving a thing in a certain way. It's not only that you have the knowledge of what is happening, it's also about your shadow, it's about your traumas, it's about your underlying beliefs, it's about all the things you're diverting from and do not want to experience. So all of that is in the mix. But it's even more than that. It's even more than that. When you look at your childhood and you say, this is my memory from my childhood, this is what I remember. Like we talked about in the lower fives, that when you have an experience in kindergarten, you're 5 years old and you're putting the blue beads in with the yellow beads, and an adult is going like, no, they're not going in there. That feeling of shame that you have when you're 5 is huge. It's absolutely huge, because you don't have the emotional maturity to see that we're talking about beads. We're not talking about you. So the feeling of shame is growing with you, and that is growing proportionately with you. So the more psychological stable you get, the more intellectual mature you get, the older you get. It makes you sit at the age of 35 and looking back at an experience that you had in kindergarten. And it's no longer about the blue beads in with the yellow beads. It's about shame. And the feeling of shame that you have now at the age of 35, it's proportionately bigger than what it was then. So the feeling of shame is like the same, right? But the story needs to change because you're more mature now. If you really could see what happened in that moment, you would see, oh, it's just about blue beads and with yellow beads. It's fine. You're okay. It's fine. It's fine. But that didn't happen. So a story was created, I am shameful. And that you have carried with you in everything. That has been your starting point in everything. And that is what we have dissolved in the lower fives. If there's still stuff that needs to be dissolved, go back to the lower fives and do the exercises that are there. Really sit with the 10 pointers in all of them and slow down and zoom in and really, really look into it. So all that can be dissolved. So the starting point can be removed. There's no longer a starting point in you about your childhood. So you can say, if I ask you how was your childhood, you can with absolutely certainty say, it was really good. You know, it has created me into the person that I am today. It was really, really good. No matter what happened. Because whatever you think happened wasn't what happened. It's just what you think happened. And that makes me want to talk a little bit about memory, because the most of us, we have that note, but I know what happened. But you don't. You don't. Our memory is not created out of accuracy. Our memory is created out of survival. So whatever was relevant in the moment is what you remember. You remember things completely, completely different than what it actually was. And there's been so many super, super interesting studies about it. Like in 2005, a study was asking people that was alive during the German occupation of Denmark, how was the weather on that day? And it was asking, how was the weather when Denmark got liberated? And people are talking about the weather when we got occupied, it was dark and it was wet and it was gloomy and it was cold. And when we got liberated, it was sunny, it was warm, and it was beautiful, beautiful day. But when you look back at how the weather actually was, basically the same on both days. The memory is not accurate. The same was created with 9/11. People were asked right after the 12th of September, was asked, where were you when you heard about what happened? And they wrote it down, and years later they were asked the same thing, and they had a completely different story. First time they said, I was in school when I heard it. Another time they have the story, I saw it on TV. Even though they didn't, but they have a clear memory of seeing that. And the most interesting one was made when Challenger exploded, that people were asked to write down where they were, how it was experienced, and all of that. And it was their own handwriting on what the experience was. And a year later, they were asked the same thing, and some of them had completely different memories about where they were when they heard about what happened. And the interesting part was that even though some of them could sit and read in their own handwriting that they were, visiting a friend and heard about it in school or anything like that, the account they had today seemed more real, even though they had in handwriting that it wasn't. It seemed more real. And they still had, but what I remember now, that was actually how it was, even though it wasn't. So our memory is not accurate at all. You can, and I've asked you to do that in a previous lesson, where I ask you to find old pictures to look at, and not just take a picture and look at it and look at it and look at it like that, where you just recognize. But really, really look at it. Really, really look at it. Look at the people in the photo. Look at the expressions. Look at how they dress. Look at how they stand next to one another. Is there distance? Look at what is in the background, what is in the foreground. Really, really look at the picture. And then know with absolutely certainty that whatever you remember from that day when that picture was taken was not what happened. What you remember from that day was based on how you slept, what you had eaten, have you had any sugar, caffeine, alcohol, any kind of, upper or downer? Where were you in your psychological stability? Where were you in your emotional maturity? All that influenced what you remember from that day. And if we ask the other people in the picture, they have completely different accounts because they had a different biochemistry, they had a different psychological stability, they had a different emotional maturity. So whatever you believe happened, it didn't. It didn't. It's just what you recall. And that alone should be enough for you to absolutely know that you cannot hold on to anything. You cannot hold on to a memory and say, this was how it was. Now, in the curriculum, a lot of times we have asked you to not delve into the story about your childhood because it's not useful, and this is why. It's not accurate. Memories are not created for accuracy, but for survival. So what we want you to do whenever anything is arising in you and a story is remembered, it's for you to use that story as a metaphor for something that needs to be addressed. There is something arising in you right now that is creating a feeling of, let's say, guilt, or a feeling of shame, or a feeling of fear. There's something arising right now, and it reminds you of something that you have experienced previously. That is why the memory is arising. This is very similar. The brain thinks it's very similar, and that is why that feeling and sensory experience in the body is arising. What we would like for you to do is detach the story, because the story is only there as a metaphor. It's not there for accuracy at all. It's just a metaphor for what direction you need to give that love and compassion to what is arising. And then you fill yourself up with love and compassion. Can you be in a body where this is arising right now? Can you be in a world where this seemingly is arising right now? And then you meet yourself with love and compassion in the moment. But know that that work that we're doing in the lower fives, it's only there to give you a new set of causes and conditions. Because everything you are today, everything you perceive as reality today, you only perceive like that because of millions of unknown causes and conditions. And it's not only what you have experienced in your life. Do you know that you were created in your grandmother? When your mother was a fetus in your grandmother, the eggs that became you were created. Just like when your grandmother was created and her eggs that was eventually going to, become your mom and become you, was created, and so everybody's connected. And it's that really knowing that life only started once. There's no beginning. You cannot say when your life started, because the causes and conditions that were present there to create the physical meat suit that you have, the causes and conditions that were present for that to happen are completely outside of our grasp. And it's the same with us sitting and talking here. For you to listen to this video, my grandparents needed to meet, lots of things needed to happen. I have never taught in English before. The first thing I did in English was the curriculum. It's that new. So causes and conditions in my life needed to happen in a certain way, fall out in a certain way for me to sit and do this. For you and all your causes and conditions to be able to sit and listen to this. You and I wouldn't have a relationship with if all of those causes and conditions hadn't happened. And we do not know why that is. We can obviously call it like divine intervention, but that's 8 Fetter belief. That is having a belief about somebody or something is sitting and pulling the strings. Can you let go of that? And if you can't, don't do it yet. Have the divine intervention thought. It's fine. Having a belief about that. And when you're ready to let go of that, go to the 8 Fetter. Because it's really that completely relinquishing all footing everywhere in anything. There is no situation that is a good situation or bad situation. You know that when you look back at your life, situation that seemingly were a bad thing happening in that moment, when you got perspective on it, it wasn't. Things that seemingly seemed like a really, really good thing when you got perspective on it, wasn't. There's no such thing as guilt or shame or fear. That is an opinion. It's based on something could be in a certain way, isn't, it's in another way, and that is giving us guilt, shame, and fear. In the moment, there is an arising. And that arising does not have any intrinsic value or depth in itself. It doesn't have any meaning in itself. It's just an arising that is happening. And that arising, you can't have an opinion about. You can, but if you really, really look at it, you can't. Because whatever opinion you have on it, it's something you're placing on top of it, which means it's not the arising anymore. It's your opinion about the arising. The arising is happening. There might be a label that you put on it that you call it guilt or shame or fear. But then we're talking about the label. We're talking about the post-it. We're no longer talking about the arising. And in that moment, it's just an arising. And that arising is neither good or bad. It's just an arising. It needs to be freed from all hindrances, and rid of fear bred by it, to quote the Heart Sutra. It needs to be free from all that. So if I ask you to think about a situation in your life, it can be something in you, it can be something about work, something about politics, something about the environment, something about oppression, something about something. Are you right? Are you right? Obviously, in the 10th fetter, you know that you can't be. You can only be opinionated. And that opinion is based on causes and conditions. Remove either of them, and you would have reached a different conclusion. There is no one that are right, because there's always somebody that has the opposite opinion. And we have the opinion that we have based on causes and conditions. And what we do with the Awakening Curriculum is to create a foundation of new causes and conditions that are created in a space where there's nothing attached to it at all. Right now you have a starting point, and an opinion is based in a starting point. What we're doing with the curriculum is completely dissolving that starting point. So there's no starting point for anything. There's no direction for anything. It's just an arising that is happening. And there's no opinion about the arising. It's just arising. It's not a good arising or bad arising. It's just an arising. And it's like that with everything. Which means you're completely free. Other people are completely free. The situation is completely free. There's just an arising. And that it gives such an utter freedom. And it also makes me want to just talk a little bit about the importance of meditation, because doing the curriculum, doing the inquiries that we have for the curriculum, it is helping you in dissolving all the hooks that you have tied into underlying beliefs and underlying truths and what you believe is in a certain way, and just unhooking all of it. Now, we're super fascinated by brain functions and brain chemistry and the way that we perceive things, and we absolutely know nothing about it at all, but it's just so fascinating. When I was in med school, the way that we were taught about the brain was that there was different sectors for different things. We now know it's not at all how it is. Not at all. There are networks that work in a certain way. We don't know exactly how memories are remembered or formed, and that feeling of a self, that we have, it's a part in the brain that is called the default mode network. So when you're sitting and meditating and you're supposed to have your attention on your breath, let's say, and then you're starting to, you notice your breath, your inhalation, exhalation, and then you start to think about shopping list, and you start to think about picking the kids up, and start to think about what you're going to do tomorrow. And when the brain shifts from noticing your breath, having a focus on something, go back into the selfing, into the what we call selfing. When we call it selfing, it is a part of the brain that is called the default mode network. So when you start to think about shopping and all of that, that is selfing. That is about like here. And then some part of your brain is alerting you to, oh, you're off task. You're supposed to notice your breath. And then you get back to the breath again. That exercise is important because that is helping you in selfing less. And that's why the inquiries that we do for the curriculum is so important to do regularly. Why it's so important to listen to the curriculum, do the exercises, because it keeps reminding you of snapping out of the selfing, snapping out of that cruise control that we're on, where we're selfing, seeing ourselves as a center, and we're back and forth, in things we're supposed to do, things we should have done different, and we're back and forth in that. That is when we are in that part of the brain. And what we talked about with the curriculum, where I say that we have like a primary reaction. We always react with fear, anger, guilt, or shame. There's always one of them that we react with. We always react like the aggressive bully, passive aggressive bully, or the chameleon. I always one of those because it's part of our survival, right? That's the primary, and that is the one that you react with like that. You don't even think about it because there are memories. Remember, memory is not about accuracy, it's about survival. So there are memories happening when something is happening outside of you. You feel threatened, so you react like that. That's the primary reaction. Now, what we're doing with the curriculum is creating emotional maturity, where you start to look at all of those underlying beliefs that are not truth. It's not truth at all. It's just what your survival has told you happened. It's not what happened, it's what you think happened. And dissolving all of those delusions is giving you an emotional maturity. And when you get that emotional maturity, you start to get a secondary reaction to things. So a secondary personality, if we can say it like that. And what we work with the inquiries and with meditation and with all the things that we do when we embody going into the body with the experience, it is working on the distance, the time that we have between the primary reaction and the secondary reaction. That time can be less. And that is what happens when you do the curriculum. So when that reaction time gets less, that means that Janice says something, you have a primary reaction, but right after you have that, oh, it's okay. It's okay. And you can look at Janice with kind eyes. There's nothing anymore, there. Because you have healed all the things that was reacting from a survival point. And that's what we do with the curriculum. So when you're now here in the 10th Fetter, what we would like for you to work with here in the 10th Fetter is really seeing that you cannot have any opinion about anything because you do not know. Whatever opinion you have, it's just a display of causes and conditions. It's a display of what you've been taught or what you believe. It's not actually reacting to reality. The reaction to reality, the only reaction to reality, is without any opinion about it. So it's just an arising. It's just an arising. You cannot have an opinion about an arising. and there will be a delusion, dissolving, and then there's another arising and a dissolving. And you cannot have an opinion about either, because it's not anything to have an opinion about. It's just an arising. And that puts you in that magical position of complete and utterly acceptance and understanding of everything. You can speak with anyone because there's no hooks into anything. There's no judgment of anything or anyone. There's no wishes for anything or anyone. It's just an arising. And that's it. That's all there is. So the question, do you think you're right? Do you think your opinion is the right opinion? And then the question, are you sure? Really, really look into it. Notice which fetter it is that you need to go back and work with. It's probably 4 and 5 that you need to go back and look with, because 4 and 5 is when we still have it out there. There's something blaming, shaming, complaining out there. They need to be different. That needs to be done different. It's out there. That is only a diversion from the 2nd and 3rd fetter in here. In reality, whatever is happening, it's okay. It's okay, because it can't be anything else. It's just an arising. So are you sure you're right? Are you sure? Of course not. You can't be. It's the middle way. You cannot come down on one side or the other, because that would be, an opinion. It's the middle way. You do not know. We do not know. We don't have all the information. We don't know what has created all the causes and conditions in us. We don't know what is motivating us at all. It could be biochemistry from your grandparents, great grandparents. We do not know. We do not know. So the only thing you can do is to solve whatever you perceive as reality in this moment, and allow this moment just to arise and dissolve, and arise and dissolve, and just sit with that. Can you be in a body where that is the case? Thank you.